Hi, this is Naomi with Sword and Steel, and today I want to share my findings after testing out every single hobby sprue cutter or look-alike that I could find from all the distributors for local hobby stores, as well as Walmart, Michaels, Home Depot, and Canadian Tire, which is like Home Depot for anyone who's not familiar with Canada. And I even went on to Amazon because that seemed like the only place at the time I could find that had these Godhand ones so that I could show you from the cheapest all the way to the most expensive, which is the Godhand one here, which hobby cutters are worth your time and which ones might not be. So I'm going to be grading them one at a time following 3 different criteria. The first one is the most important one, I think, and that is sharpness. For anyone who has ever cut meat or vegetable or anything really, for anyone who is shaved with a sharp blade versus a dull blade, sharpness matters, and it matters a lot here. The second one is comfort. Not really as important as sharpness because most of these are gonna get you by, but I thought it worth mentioning because the more comfortable it is, the less you have to stop to take breaks with your hand. So instead of stopping after half an hour because your hand is uncomfortable, you could stop after many hours. And the last criteria, the third criteria, is reach. There's no point to have sharp blades if they can't actually reach the position you want them to be in, so that the hobby cutter is parallel with the piece that you want to cut away from the sprue. If it can't get in there, if it's too thick or if it's too short, that matters. And if you enjoy this video, if you found it at all useful, do me that very quick service of giving it a like. If you had any questions, comment, and I hope you enjoy. First one, which is just called a nipper tool. I don't expect it's going to be thin enough. Oh, that was harder than it needed to be. Oh, you can even hear the snap with these little things. Yeah, see how it just flew right off there? No matter what you're using, you always want to take off the weakest part first and put your finger right here to catch that vibration. But you hear that snap even with this small little piece? Means it's not exactly sharp. So for the Beadalon nipper cutter from Michaels, it earns a C for sharpness, a B for comfort, and a B for reach, since it's just barely thin enough to get around the sprue. Next one is same price, also from Michaels. Basically, my choices were everything that someone who's new to this might choose. Yeah, this is not going to work, but let's show you why I say so. All right, we'll bring this in. Okay, first of all, let's hear the snap. Just go slowly if you don't think it's going to work. Oh yeah, ow, and that was a little painful on there. Yeah, so anyone who thinks that this is the same as a hobby cutter is gonna be disappointed. So the bead landing superfine side cutter from Michaels earns a D for sharpness because it's sharper than a butter knife, so I can't give it an F. It's a D for comfort because I felt it dig in with just one cut, so that's not great. A B for reach, not that I would ever suggest using it for this. Maximum, quite thick, but it does thin out a lot. And it comes to a very nice flat surface on the back, which is nice. Provides a fully flush cut when cutting tie wraps, plastic, and soft metals. Soft metals would be possible for metal miniatures then. Listen for the snap. Oh, here it wasn't actually a snap. It was more like a thud. That means it's sharper than what we just worked with. Still a pretty loud snap, but better. Definitely more sharp. So we are getting into more sharp territory. It can scoot itself in. And that did just fine, really. Yeah, that's okay. This is good. Yeah, this is going to be difficult. Let's see if we can scoot it. Sometimes you just have to rotate your piece. I see if I don't hold it and it doesn't fly anywhere, you know it's pretty sharp. It should just fall into my, okay, a little bit of reverberation. It should just fall into my hand. Okay, so for the maximum flush cutter, which is labeled to handle soft metals, I would go with a C for sharpness. It's sharper than the Beadalon nipper cutter, but not enough to hit my grade B, so B- at the best. It gets a C for comfort because I do not particularly find that shape particularly comfortable long term. And for reach, it is quite thick. Despite that, I actually had no trouble getting in between the pieces on these smaller sprues, but I have dealt with enough sprues from different companies to know that they won't be able to handle all types, which mean I can only give this guy a B for reach. Klein tools, this one was from Home Depot. It does say that it should be able to cut metal. Listen for the snap. You didn't really hear that, did you? Not much at all. These are sharp, so these are nice. Can get nice and close. And not much snapping going on at all. This one, does it fall in my hand or does it snap off somewhere? Just falls into my hand. You can tell that's sharp. So the Klein Tools Precision Flush Cutter, labeled to also handle soft metals. Still not on the level of the higher end cutters for sharpness, but I would call it a B in sharpness. And for comfort, it's more comfortable than the previous ones. Not the most comfortable I've handled though, so it is a B, but I think you could use it for some time. For reach, it is almost too thick. I would prefer it a little thinner, or a little more pointed at the top, but it's all right. So that's another B. If you're on a very tight budget, I would agree that this is a viable option. The Milwaukee doesn't specify exactly what it's supposed to be cutting, but it does show that it's cutting wires, so presumably some weak metals like metal miniatures would be perfectly fine for it. It's not as thin as some of the others. Does it get as close as you want it to be? It's a little bit too thick for that, actually. Listen for the snap. Some snap. Let's try again. Better than this first one for the snap, but it's not as sharp as this one, the one I just did. So between the two of them, since they're the same price, I'd go with that one. So the Milwaukee Mini Flush Cutters, which also came from Home Depot like the Klein tools. I would put it, however, at a C for sharpness, a C for comfort, because it was a little rough in your hands. The coating on the grip is a little too stiff, though those with tougher hands might find it perfectly fine, since overall its shape is good. And had D, however, for reach, because it barely fit into any of the sprues I tried it with, and these are not even as tightly packed a sprue as you can get. Okay, now we go on to the first one designed basically just for plastic models. Well, it's better than the one I just used. Let's pull it up. Yeah, see, I was accidentally had it on the table. Yeah, it is nice. And because it's sharp, it's going to be better at taking off your miniatures safely. Or how about this little guy with the pistol? It should fall into your hand. Okay, maybe not. How about this one? Is this one going to fall into your hand? Maybe I'll just do it a little bit slower. There we go. I feel like they're basically about the same. Also, this is Gale Force 9, So I don't know how accessible the Klein's Tools one is, but this is Gale Force 9, so it's very accessible. So the Gale Force 9 plastic side cutter for cutting plastic or resin, doesn't seem to be for metal, has a B for sharpness, since they do get sharper still, but it's decent for its cost. A B for comfort, the shape is fine, length is fine, but there are more comfortable ones out there. And for reach, I would call it an A for reach. It should be able to get into any type of sprue you come across with ease. The Army Painter plastic frame cutters. So specifically talking about plastic, and has a case. That's always nice. Easily accessible because it's the Army Painter. This is perfectly comfortable, though I have found in the past that these guys can slide off. This one's to be perfectly fine, but I have found that these like to slide off, which is annoying. You don't want that. No. How about right here? How about right here? Okay, so not as sharp as the previous two, therefore I would not choose it among the ones that I've already had. So the Army Painter plastic frame cutters. It has a C in sharpness because it can cut, but you're going to need more force than I would like to use on your miniature pieces to do so. I would give its comfort a B. It does feel fairly comfortable in your hand, but because of the force you would need to apply constantly due to its lack of sharpness, that's going to cause your hand to ache over not so great a time period, depending on your toughness and hand strength, of course. But for reach, it does have perfectly decent reach and finer tips, so it gets an A for that. Sprue and photo etch cutter, flush cuts on photo etch parts, thin wire and plastic. So again, this would be potentially okay for metal miniatures as well. I think this would have the same problem as the Army Painter one. It seems like it'll come apart at some point. It also doesn't have that most every single one has a spring. It doesn't have a spring. So you have to open it up and close it. Feels like it was meant to have a spring, and I'm just missing it. See, it's supposed to have a spring. Okay, so just note, this is supposed to have a spring. Don't buy it if for some reason it's missing. Oh, it's actually alright for sharpness. Well, I'm only awkward with it because I'm used to the spring action. Okay, so its sharpness is actually not a problem. Notice that you can get accustomed to it without a spring, but if you happen to lose yours, it's quite thin, so it can get close, and it's quite flat, though it doesn't look as flat as some of the others. Let's see. But it can get very close, and it's sharper, though I think I like a better point, come to think of it, because I mean, it's all right. The comfort is okay, not the best. I'm not that pleased with it since it's getting higher in price, and it doesn't seem to be higher in quality. And oh, right, and this just came right off. I guess this is why it lost its spring, because and the spring probably goes in here with it. So this just came right off. Make certain it has its spring. The spring probably keeps this piece in place, but yeah, I'm not too keen on that one at all. So Vallejo's plastic and photo etch cutter. It has a B in sharpness, a B in comfort, though if it falls off easily, I would downgrade that to a C. Not that some glue couldn't fix it, I suppose, and I would call it a B or maybe even a B plus for reach. I do prefer more finely tipped cutters, and there are simply better options out there than this one. Now we have the last one from Home Depot, the last one that isn't a specifically designed for miniatures cutting. Nothing wrong with the comfort level, I think, on this. This one is just a pair of pliers which you'd be able to use for whatever you want to use pliers for, probably putting tufts down onto your bases. Not the greatest sounding for sharpness. Nope, at least this one isn't, not off the bat. I'm trying to be very gentle so that it has as much chance to be quiet as possible. No. Okay, so the sharpness of this is not too great. It's going to need more force, and since it's going to need more force because it's not as sharp, you're going to have more reverberation going across your plastic miniatures, and therefore you're going to potentially have... It looks like I also can't get very close. Okay, so even though this feels great in your hand, because it actually reminds me of the of Xuron ones, even though it feels great, you can't get as the cut isn't quite as close. Yeah, it just can't get quite as close a cut as the other ones. All right, Crescent's precision miniature wire cutter and pliers set. Though I can likely handle metal miniatures, so if that is what you're going to be focused on with the bonus pliers, this might be a great possibility for you. But for plastic and resin models, I would call it a D in sharpness. An A in comfort, I'll give it that. And then also an A in reach, but with the caveat that despite its reach, the cut isn't that clean. So we're going to have to drop it down to a B. Right, this one, Xuron. I'm biased because it always works for me. That's probably a good reason to be biased, right? This one might not be as sharp as some of the others. Okay, maybe it was the way I was holding it. Yeah, this one's probably the sharpest. Yeah, so right out of the bat, the Klein's tools was sharper. And the Xuron is then only the second sharpest so far. It's very comfortable to use. You can get a very close cut. It can get where you need it to go. So the Xuron Micro-Shear Ultra Flush Cutter, I would say normally has closer to an A in sharpness. But today's one was a B, so I'm putting it at the top, but it's somewhere between an A and a B because looks like you'll be able to get A's, as I've had with this one before, but maybe you'll get a B. It does have an A in comfort and an A in reach, but as it's more in cost compared to the others, I would prefer it to have a little more sharpness right out of the package. Nevertheless, I have used this one for years, and I'm satisfied overall with its performance. The Godhand GH SPN specifically, there's nothing wrong with the quality of this. It is as comfortable as the Xuron. It definitely can get into wherever you want it to go. Now, cut. Oh, that's sharp. All right, so it's on par. I think it's actually a little sharper than anything that we've gone with so far, which is great. And because of its sharpness, it's going to be very gentle on these fragile pieces. So, the Godhand GH SPN Plastic Cutting Nipper. It has a A grade for sharpness. It has an A grade for comfort. You should be able to spend hours assembling models with this guy without any fuss. And it has an A grade for reach. Maybe I would want it a little longer if I were going to be particular, but it will do the job just nicely. And though double the price of the lower end cutters, there's clearly a good reason for that price, as the quality has risen with it. Next is Tamiya's sharp-pointed Sidecutter. All right. Do you hear that? Or don't hear it? I will say that it is the sharpest by far among all of the ones tested so far, though the reach is a little more limited. The only thing is, I have found that 60% of the people who have tested this out get pinched right in here. So I would call that a flaw. However, I think you could get yourself out of it, but you might have some pinched fingers in the meantime as you're learning how not to use it that way. But people with larger hands and more calloused hands don't seem to have this issue. It's just the squishy fingered, smaller hands people that you might want to worry about it. Tamiya's Sharp Pointed Sidecutter. Well, it gets an S grade for sharpness. Yes, I'm making the next grade up, as it's beyond the sharpness necessary to be a great hobby cutter. Very few cutters reach this level of sharpness. I am impressed with it, but because it painfully pinches at least half of the people who have used it, I would call it an F in comfort for those people vulnerable to the pinch. And, well, I suppose a B, B minus for those who aren't vulnerable. It has the same level of comfort as the Maximum, so not the best design for comfort in my opinion. But because it is so very sharp, very little force needs to be applied, and thus your hand will last longer using it despite its less ergonomic design. And it also doesn't have the greatest reach, since it ends in a bulk hunk of metal a little too abruptly for my taste. Is that a safety feature somehow? Like, so people can't accidentally stab themselves with it too much? Still, I think you'll be able to use it for most anything that you want, as long as you beware of the pinch. Okay, next we have this, which is all of this is the exact same price as this one pair of clippers. And there's a pair of clippers in here that I'm not expecting much of, but I can always be surprised. And this little guy right in there, I do like this hobby drill. And you get all of this other stuff, a little bit of green stuff, super glue, and all of that, so that's nice. They seem to always have a nice guide for painting things in their kit, so that's always nice. If you're new to it, I'd suggest looking through those guides. They're handy. This is definitely not on par with their other ones. This is the one that they have by itself. And this still says the Army Painter, but this is doesn't look like it's actually even designed for, well, not for plastic miniatures, maybe for metal miniatures. Yeah, even the super glue. This seems more aligned for resin or maybe metal models, because since this guy is going to be so cheap, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't last very long, does it? Yeah, so comfort is comfort is not exactly there. The size is going to be a problem. I would say this was not designed for plastic models. Metal models, where you're not getting into a sprue, resin models, if you're not getting into a sprue, by all means, if you're just clipping off extra flashing for a metal model or a resin model, but not plastic models, is my suggestion. Oh boy, it's not very sharp. It's also not going to be very comfortable. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with this. I mean, it's a cheap piece, but you can get away with this. So this is fine. This guy's fine. A little bit of green stuff is always nice. The file is always nice. That's what I thought. So this is the same one that you can get individually, and I like this one. All right, so the Army Painter Hobby Toolkit seems decent for 3D printed resin models, or even more particularly for assembling metal miniatures, but it is clearly not designed for plastic miniatures that you have to remove from a sprue. I do hope the Army Painter comes out with a new toolkit then that is more oriented towards plastic miniatures. To give the cutter in this set a grade though, I would say it has a D in sharpness, a D in comfort, and a C in reach. Alright, next we have this Elegoo 3D paint kit. Elegoo gave this to me. Now, I think as it says it's a 3D paint kit, but I think that's kind of doing it a disservice because it has self-healing cutting mat, a couple J-cloths from the field, various grit in sandpaper, a whole bunch of paint. I do not yet know the quality of these paints, so I'm going to try that out. I feel like they're just a bonus, really. Good primer, yeah. Primer. Is this also primer? No, that's varnish. Okay, so primer and, black, white, and 3 primary colors. A whole bunch of gloves for when you are dealing with your resin models. Got a couple files of different grit, 4 little paint brushes, which will do decent enough based on their sizes and points. This one's probably gonna have to be reworked. Toothbrush. It's all wavied out. That's probably not the word, but wavied out so that you can get in and clean off your resin models. So that's really cute. Tack, just so that you can attach your models to something to paint them with. And we've got this teeny weeny little wet palette with extra wet palette sheets. This kit is just really nice for anyone who's starting out with plastic models or resin models because of all the stuff that it comes with. Ah, yes, so here's the handle then. Okay, so I was correct. It looks like it's a 3D printed handle, which is cute, to attach the sticky tack to, so that you can attach your model. Painter's tape, which you can cut down to size if you want to. A hobby knife with regular refill blades, as well as these chiseling blades. Ooh, there's the hobby cutters that we were looking for. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they are indeed Xuron. This one's going to be very similar to the mid-range one. And then we've got smaller pieces of sandpaper. So we've got a lot of stuff in this kit. I really like this kit. And if you're looking to just do plastic models with this kit, you just want to pick up some plastic glue. Everything else is really great to just get you started. Now, it's of course available in the Elegoo paint kit, but you could also get this copy singly. I think not as easily as you can get the other two. Also, it feels like this is not the same level of softness as the higher end one, so this must be a lower end copy of it. Yeah, I don't expect it to be the same level of precision that the higher end ones have. Not coming out of the box not bad, but not coming out of the box incredibly sharp, because I think this was just slightly more cheaply made. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with how close it cuts. Cuts lovely, very close, as all of the other Xuron ones do. So, the Elegoo 3D Paint Kit has the most bang for your buck. If you are collecting all your hobby tools for the first time, I like this thing. But for the cutter itself, it has a B for sharpness, a B, almost an A for comfort, maybe an A, just not quite as nice as the others of its kind. And its reach is an A. This kit, the cost is equal to 10 of these paints, which means that the rest of the paints and all of the materials in it beyond the paints would be considered free. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this one is just a little cheap one. It does come to enough of a point that you could get in there. Not ideally. So I'd call that a B, I suppose. Doesn't look like you'd pinch yourself, because it doesn't actually squeeze close enough. So that's nice in comparison to this one, which looks very similar, I gotta say. But even though they look similar, this one is clearly a higher quality. Actually, it's not bad at all. Okay, maybe not the best. Still causes a lot of reverberation, but there were worse ones. Yeah. If you go really slowly, it does get in nice and close. Let's just check. Not the closest. but close enough that you can use this little guy to finish off the rest of it. Comfort is not actually that there. It's small, so it's probably going to cramp larger people's hands, maybe. Just make certain you have breaks in between if you're going to have to use this, because it does basically come free with 13 paints. So, Games Workshop Citadel Hobby Cutter from the Paint and Tool set. This one being the Age of Sigmar one, but you'll find that the 40k one, which just has different paints to collect, still has the same cutter in it. This cutter would be a B for sharpness, but lower end, so, B minus. Its comfort would be a C, as I don't think it will be comfortable beyond the first hour or two if you're lucky. And a B for reach, as I think the reach will cover most situations, but more tightly compacted sprues might cause issue. All right, the next one is the Xuron Professional Sprue Cutter, much more pricey than the previous one, also larger in size. And they're a nice size, more comfortable for larger hands. No pinching options too. Very nice quality. Look at how fine they come to a point. And again, like most others, they don't meet exactly on purpose, because that's to keep them sharp for long periods of time. But they do their job very well. I do have to just pull up the Tamiya. Yeah, it's the Tamiya ones again to feel once more if they are as sharp as the Tamiya. No, the Tamiya ones are still winning in sharpness, but these are now second place. Note that they are so sharp that you don't really have to worry about reverberation at all. They're going to be incredibly gentle on delicate miniatures, such that you don't even have to hold them in place. Though I suggest you still do so. When it comes to Xuron's Professional Sprue Cutter, I have done a significant amount of testing. This one is so old it even has rust developing on it, and it still works. So it is an A all around. A for sharpness, even after years of using it, I'd say up to a decade of extensive use. A for comfort, and A for reach. Expensive, sure, in comparison to the other hobby cutters on this list so far, but better than all others on this list so far. The Tamiya does beat it in sharpness. But you would not be disappointed if you chose this one to be your cutter. The super fine detail cutters of GW. The comfort level is not as it is with these ones, but you should be all right. It's very thin, so that's an A for reach. And it is very sharp. As you can tell from the sound. Because of its sharpness, it should just fall into your hand rather than go flying anywhere because of the sharpness of the cutters. So this one is a very lovely pair of cutters, but the consistency across every single one of them is not at the same level as Xuron, and Xuron is a cheaper brand and has more comfortable grips. However, if you were going to get this pair, you should be satisfied with them. And if you are not satisfied, if it didn't perform like I just showed you because of how accessible these are, you should be able to talk with someone at your local game store or at GW itself, and they will get you a better pair, because generally speaking, their customer service for that is good. So, the super fine cutters of Games Workshop earn an A for sharpness, this particular pair being just as sharp as the last Xuron brand, which means it beats all of the other cheaper pairs besides the Tamiya cutters. It is a B grade for comfort, because though you can go the distance with these, I did find some ache build up with these a lot faster than the Xuron brand, so a B. But for each, they are an A grade, nothing at all wrong with them there. The most expensive of what I could gather, the Godhand GH SPN 120. Well, I like that. I like that it's cushioned. So it goes right in there to keep it nice and safe. All right, and the last one for sound. I don't know if you can see it, but it just goes in with so little difficulty because this is the sharpest of the bunch. It is so easy to cut through this plastic that you are not going to have any difficulty. The only issue that you might have is that its reach is so short before it gets to this big old hump here that you might have difficulty with larger scale models on Sprue. You might not be able to reach everywhere that you want to. That isn't to say you can't, I mean, just cut the darn Sprue out of the way if need be, because cutting it out of the way is going to be really easy. But the fact that you have to do that seems so silly because they could have just made these blades a little longer. Nevertheless, it is definitely the sharpest I have ever used. So that's why the Godhand GH SPN 120 comes with a godly price tag. It has an SS level of sharpness. There has been nothing sharper in my experience thus far. It has only a B for comfort. The grip does feel nicer than the others of similar shape, but I am familiar with the shape and I know it's not going to be that comfortable for that long. But just like the Tamiya cutters, the sheer lack of force you need to apply to use these cutters will allow you to keep going a lot longer than you would if with a similarly shaped, duller cutter. So there is that. For reach, well, I really wish it had a longer reach. I really do. It will be successful with most every sprue that comes your way, but I have tested this particular fellow, and the cutters simply don't reach quite as far as you need for some of the larger model sprues. Do I think it's worth the cost to buy it? Well, I think that's up for you and your budget to decide. But I don't think you could be disappointed with them if you do make that move. And there we go. But there is one that I could not locate, but I know it exists. It might be out of print now, but in case you come across it, it is the Prismatic Dungeons and Dragons Sprue cutter that I have used in the past, but I cannot currently gain access to for whatever reason that WizKids was putting out. If I recall correctly, it had like an A reach, a B cutting, and a B in comfort. So that's worthwhile for among the low ends as well. If you want to know what the two best ones were for the cheapest of the cheap ones, then I would say either the Klein tools, which was the Home Depot one, or Gale Force 9, which is a hobby one that you can get in hobby shops. These two would be the best. But if you wanted to go mid-range, well then the mid-range one are between these two. I found the comfort level of these ones better, and also the reach is better for the mid-range one. This particular one, B in sharpness, so I think you'd be happy with either one of these. I would really like the Xuron to have been the superb of the superb because they're so accessible, and I really love the size of them and the reach of them. They're great for everyone. But I will admit that the Tamiya and the Godhand are more sharp. I wish they had better reach. I wish they had a different grip to them. So there was nothing perfect. If we're going to go with perfect, between the two of them, I would probably go with this one because it's half the price. The only thing that makes this one better in my mind is the fact that it doesn't pinch. So if pinching isn't a problem for you, I'd probably go with that one in comparison to the Godhand, and that one, as it's Tamiya, should be more readily available to you. However, my favorite is still this one because it is reliable and doesn't pinch. And that's all my findings. If you had any questions, let me know. Catch you in the next one. Bye! What are your thoughts on also doing the same sort of thing for plastic glue?